By the late 1960s, Gibson was producing hundreds of guitars each day. Demand for those instruments was high, and the company expanded again in 1968. The future looked so bright that a South American brewery conglomerate called ECL bought the company in 1969. Of the late 1960s and the 1970s became difficult to disentangle from the sounds and images of Gibson guitars. Robbie Krieger playing his SG as Jim Morrison is arrested on stage in Miami. Carlos Santana with his SG at Woodstock. John Lennon with an Epiphone on a London rooftop. Keith Richards playing Under My Thumb on a sunburst Les Paul as an audience member is stabbed at Altamont. Most people's first impressions of hard rock and heavy metal and glam rock in the early 1970s involved a Gibson Les Paul or an SG. In Martin Scorsese's documentary The Last Waltz, which brought together some of the greatest musicians in the history of rock and roll, there were no less than 6 instruments on stage with the band at the Winterland Ballroom that were built in Kalamazoo, Michigan. ECL, soon to change its name to Norlin, had every reason to expect that this place in popular culture would drive sales forever.
Do you do you actually play all these, or?
Well, I play them and I cherish them. Mm-hmm. This is the top of the heap right here. There's no question about it. Look at the flame on that one.
Yes.
Look, I mean, it's quite unbelievable. This one is just it's perfect. 1959. It just you can listen.
How much is
just
this?
Listen for a minute. Sustain. Listen to it.
I'm not hearing anything.
You would though if it were playing because it's famous for its sustain. I mean, you can just hold it.
Yet even as their popularity rose, demand for new guitars began to flatten, and competitors like Guild and Paul Reed Smith and a host of Asian guitar makers grabbed shares of that ebbing market away from Gibson. Norlin, seeking to cut costs and perhaps escape the strong union presence in Kalamazoo, began moving production to Nashville, Tennessee. By the early 1980s, only a skeleton crew remained at Parsons Street as a sort of custom shop. Gibson closed the plant for good in 1984. While most historians cite poor management and declining quality for the drop in demand for Gibson instruments in the 1980s, others point to the fact that in leaving Kalamazoo, Gibson left behind hundreds of skilled employees. West Michigan likely had one of the highest guitar makers per capita populations in the world. Leaving them behind was bound to hurt quality and productivity. And while they were proud of their work, most were unwilling to move to Nashville to work for non-union wages, preferring to remain in Kalamazoo and move on to other careers. Their friends and families and bowling leagues and local pubs were in Kalamazoo, not in Nashville. Nostalgia has become perhaps the most potent force in the world of guitar buying, playing, selling, and collecting. Among the most sought-after and expensive instruments in the world are those that were made in Kalamazoo. A Lloyd Loar signed mandolin, for example, or a 1959 Les Paul Sunburst. And almost all years and models of made-in-Kalamazoo instruments increase or at least hold their value. This makes for tough competition for modern guitar makers. Even before the move to Nashville, 225 Parsons Street had become a sort of mecca for guitarists and admirers. Elvis had been in the building. Johnny and June Carter Cash had come to Parsons Street, story has it, with their upright bass on top of their station wagon in need of a repair. Stories about Chet Atkins and Keith Richards, Emmylou Harris, Willie Nelson and Merle Travis. They had all come to Kalamazoo, had seen the employees making the instruments, and had been awed by the experience. And what other industry could boast a workforce who would, even after they were downsized out of their careers, talk fondly for decades about the work they had done? The paper industry? The pill industry? The taxi cab industry? These didn't create the same type of loyalty. But having made guitars seems to have filled Kalamazooans with great pride. It gave the town a happy story, if with a sad ending. And ever since, generations of their children and grandchildren get to see players around the world valuing and continuing to make music on the instruments they made here in Kalamazoo.